Hi there. Let's have a look at the game mentioned in episode 5 of the Queen's Gambit, that amazing new Netflix series, which I have to heartily recommend. If you haven't watched it yet, go and watch it. Okay, so Vasily Smyslov against Mikhail Botvinnik. This was a game played in 1958 in the Smyslov-Botvinnik World Chess Championship match, round 11. So Vasily Smyslov with the white pieces plays d4. We see knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3. And Botvinnik plays the Grunfeld defense. So this later was also adopted by Garry Kasparov. Garry Kasparov was in the Botvinnik school of chess, so he had a big influence. Botvinnik had a big influence over Kasparov, especially for detailed, rigorous opening preparation. So in this game we see knight f3, bishop g7, and queen b3. I'd actually made a recommendation for this system against the Grunfeld many years back on the Botvinnik Chess Club website. I just thought it's nice. It undermines black's central control. The price paid for it, your queen could be kicked around a little bit. So we see d takes, queen takes, black castles, now e4, bishop g4. Here, there's a modern stem game with a6, as in Magnus Carlsen against Levon Aronian. And that game continued like this, where Magnus actually got quite a nice position eventually. It seems a bit tricky, doesn't it? But he got a nice position eventually out of the opening, and went on to win this later in 34 moves from this position. So it's a hot topic even today. You know, Magnus Carlsen, the current world champion, playing with the white side here. But we see bishop g4 in this particular game, bishop e3. White doesn't mind double pawns. Giving up the light square bishop is quite a concession. This bishop running rampant without any counterpart. We see knight fd7. Black is not immediately going to double the pawns. Rook d1, knight b6, queen drops back, knight c6. So it seems elegant enough that black is coordinating against d4 here in various ways. But without c5, is this such a bother for white? If black had played bishop takes f3 immediately here, by the way, this situation seems as though white's going to be slightly better. Even though white has the double pawns, the bishop pair here is quite nice. And maybe even if b2 is sacrificed, white gets a lot of pressure going here in return. So overall, that's better for white. So let's have a look. So knight c6 was played. We see d5, knight e5, bishop e2, knight takes, f3 check, g takes. Yes, accepting the double pawns here. It's a very, very interesting decision. It strengthens the centre on this occasion. And Mikhail Botvinnik himself played with double pawn structures quite a bit, and often winning with them. We see bishop h5. This keeps a lid on things with h4, h5 later. That might have been more possible. If bishop h3, then rook g1, example like this, white should be better here with f4 and queen a3 as an example. So, okay, so bishop h5, we see h4, nevertheless, queen d7, a4, a5, and here, yeah, there's no point black trying to nab a pawn. That would be very greedy to take on c3 just to take on a4. This is just going to be a backfire on the dark squares. One should expect logically, or it's just generally a good position. You know, it's huge compensation. Black doesn't want to do that. So a5, knight b5, but this knight seems a bit fragile now. The possibilities, including knight takes c7 to undermine the knight. We've seen the knight moving. If rook a b8, it turns out actually bishop f4 here is actually maybe this is just a small edge. So in fact, knight takes c7 immediately, as mentioned, is still good. Even if black wins a4 like this, the knight is stranded, and white ends up winning material with precise play. So opening up the diagonal to get out of pins. With precise play, white's consolidating. So we see knight c8 anyway. Bishop d4. So this aims to weaken black's king by getting rid of that bishop. It's a very useful perk of this position, this d5 pawn chain, to basically reduce the king safety of the opponent. In fact, we reached one of the last STEM games. F4 has been seen in an overboard game, Re against Smith, Budapest 1977. And that game continued like this, where, this is okay for white there. Or rather, pardon me, after F4, bishop takes here, knight d6, e5. In that respect, there was knight takes b5, pardon me, knight takes b5. And eventually, white went on to win from this kind of position. So white does have some sort of pressure on the king side here. Okay, so bishop d4 anyway, so not f4. We see knight d6, so that bishop is taken off. And now knight d4, this seems very pleasant to maneuver back to d4. So Smyslov's play seems very logical. He's weakened the black king. There's a semi-open g-file. White stands better. But in the Netflix series, the queen's already cheekily on h3. And they're saying black, the comment is black should take in the pawn. So it wasn't really this position. It was this position. The queen's on d7. So they're playing around there. So anyway, king g8. We have rook g1. Queen h3, queen e3, and now c5. Now, if we ask the question, interestingly, could the pawn have been taken here? This is of historic analytical interest to me, actually. Could the pawn on h4 have been taken here? There is actually a remarkable finding in this position. I have to say, Stockfish Neural Network is opening up these findings. The finding is e5 with the concept. Can you believe what white can play here? Which, it's a Stockfish NN finding. What does white play here? And it actually highlights a potentially significant advantage for white in this position. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. I thought it was pretty nifty. The whole concept is pretty advanced, I think. Okay, king d2. The concept is pretty advanced. To sacrifice the exchange sometimes, and then use the c-file. So there's still the c7 target. So here is the variation which shows this up, this concept. e6, rook h1. Just sack the exchange. And this is really dangerous after queen h6. With rook g1 coming, it's extremely dangerous. If f6, bishop d3, this situation where white's getting loads of compensation for the exchange sack. And in fact, even if there isn't a mate here, because of the pressure now on c7 and this entrenched knight, white could actually switch to the queen side, putting the king on b1 first, and white's getting an insurmountable position in the center. For example, like this, and then attacking c7. It's just an illustration, but it shows how white could actually, use an exchange sacrifice sometimes to crash through. It's a fictional continuation. And if you're wanting to see another branch or two here, if e5, this is old analysis of this classic game. It was a World Championship game under great scrutiny. There's a finding here with d takes. After f takes, knight takes. And here, knight g5, there was a finding with rook takes d6, bishop c4 check, bishop f7, and the black king is in trouble after knight g5. It's very difficult for black to defend. But yeah, I think, so another critical test though is c5 rather than e5. So this has been analysed before. Obviously in the Soviet Union it was a very high level game. So e5, there was some analysis on e5 before. But yeah, this interesting thing about c5 if c5, white also does well with c5. This is a nice position for white as well. But, okay, this is all if the analysis I've presented just now is, before that, is if queen takes h4 being played here. Interesting, isn't it, that king d2, I find it interesting, king d2 can lead to an exchange sack, and then can lead back to pressure on c7 if the king's tucked away over here on b1. It's a brilliant plan. It makes you want to play the Smyslov variation to recreate this plan, this exchange sacrifice plan. Okay, so c5 is played, though, in the actual game, and after d takes, b takes, we have queen g5. And the game didn't end too long here. It's quite brutal what happens here. White is threatening both queen takes h5. Now, this is actually brutal on the simple g-file pin. And also, you know, knight takes and queen takes. I mean, there are numerous threats. Black plays c5, knight c6. And the game actually ended here, the Smyslov Botvinnik World Championship game. Yeah, quite crushing. Botvinnik crushed. Maybe he gave this to his students like Garry Kasparov to study and see the resources for both sides. If the game continued here, say with king h8, queen takes e7, and this is nasty because there's an idea of queen f6 and knight e7 mating. And if knight f5, that's purely desperate. That can be taken. This is utter desperation. This is absolutely massive advantage. But yeah, otherwise, you know, just put something on the board to show the mate. Well, I can't really. The knight hasn't got many squares to go. The rook can't even protect the knight. It's ridiculous. This is a ridiculous situation to be in. Yeah, where is the knight actually going? Knight e8, queen takes. It's ridiculous. So yeah, that was crushing to play knight c6 there. So c5, yeah, is unfortunate. So it seems as though Smyslov had the upper hand all along in this game. His variation with queen b3, which, you know, has been named after him, if you look at these named variations, they often have a really high success rate with them. And you should be basically studying examples of that named person. You should check out their example games if you did want to play this Smyslov variation. Yeah, so very interesting reminder. Thanks, Garry Kasparov, in the Netflix series, getting us to look up these historical games, iconic games. So Smyslov against Botvinnik, yeah, World Championship match with the Smyslov Queen B3 variation. Very interesting game. I hope you got something from this. Okay, and you might want to check out my recent chess tactics course. It's doing really well, very high rating. If you want to improve your chess tactics, check out Kingscrusher TV/chess tactics. Also, there's a London system course there. And if you want to invite me for a game, 5 days a move, if you register via Kingscrusher TV/chess world or just Kingscrusher TV, register, I'll be able to invite you for a game pretty soon after. Okay. Comments, questions, like, share, subscribe with the notification bell. Always appreciated. And check out the playlist I've created as well for this series. I'll put it in a pinned comment underneath the video. Okay, thanks very much.